Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's NKBA KBIS design webinar, Porcelain Slabs, Finding the Right Labor. As we continue our theme of the design and build process for the month of June, I'd like to welcome today's speaker, Nathan Parsons, CEO of the Porcelain Slab Co. Nathan, please take it away.
You have a keen eye for design, and it shows in the projects that you work on. You're always able to find just the right material to bring out the details that your clients are looking for. And it's with that unique approach that on this particular day, you're walking through your favorite stone yard or your favorite tile shop, and you come across it. It's the most stunning material you've ever seen, and you find out that it's a porcelain slab. You call your favorite stone shop, they don't work with them. You call your favorite tile guy, and he has no way to handle something that big. What are you going to do? How are you going to find the skilled labor necessary to make this design and this project get completed? Well, that is what we are going to talk about today, and hopefully help you to find the right labor to make that project happen. Our discussion today is porcelain slabs, finding the right labor. Now, my name is Nathan Parsons. I'm founder and CEO of the Porcelain Slab Company. We're based just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, and we work exclusively with porcelain slabs. You can find me online and some of my social media handles under Porcelain Panel Pro, as well as a podcast where I talk to other installers around the country and in fact around the world who have been working with porcelain slabs for close to 10 years. Now, with my background, I come from the stone industry, granite countertops, quartz countertops. And I first stumbled into porcelain slabs way back when in 2014. Now, I had never touched tile a day in my life. I was just the gung-ho salesperson getting sent to a factory in Tennessee to learn. But I came away from that first visit knowing that porcelain slabs were going to be something special for the industry. Now, because of that, I had to learn everything there was to learn about tile in general. And just recently, I was able to finally secure my CTI, my Certified Tile Installer number of 1969. Now, besides running and operating my own business here in North Carolina, I do consult and teach other fabricators and tile installers how to work with porcelain slabs, everything from floors, walls, to countertops, and so much more. But you're not here to listen to my background and all of my experiences working with porcelain slabs. No, we're trying to figure out a way for your projects and your specific market and your clients that expect the best from you, how to find ways to get the projects done. But to get a project done, we first have to start with the labor. And this is an important part of any project, as I'm sure you've run into many times before. You've perhaps heard the horror stories of porcelain slabs breaking on installers because they did not know what they were doing, or a job needing to be ripped out because it did not follow industry standards. So why is finding labor so important? Well, first off, porcelain slabs have an immense high design value. You can use them in just about any setting, any application. As long as it's flat, you can cover it with porcelain slabs. At the same time, they are incredibly useful. They are UV stable. They are near impervious to water to be able to go through the surface material. And because it's a photorealistic printout, for lack of better words, you're able to design something that is going to be exactly as you see it on the sample or on that first slab on the stack. It is able to keep the same look over and over and over again, where you can't get that with natural stone and definitely cannot get that with engineered materials like quartz. At the same time, by choosing the wrong labor, you are going to have very expensive projects. They're going to be breaking panels in ways that you did not anticipate someone could break something. You are going to have the issue that the customer may not like how something was done. Slabs just breaking, and I've seen some unique adjustments that are made in the field on projects that we've been called into. The overall problem here is that if you hire someone that's inexperienced, they're going to learn on the site, and it's going to be an expensive learning curve. At the same time, As a designer, you have these ideas and looks that your clients are asking you to come through with. And the concept of not hearing a no, I would imagine is something that you like. So if you find the right person to partner with, the right business that's able to handle the workload to which you're designing, well, then you're going to hear yeses all of the time. A quick anecdote is that we had a client here in the Raleigh area that had a fireplace that was about 3 slabs high. They wanted corners mitered. They had a lot of little details. And whatever stone fabricator went in there before us kept telling the homeowner, no, can't do that. No, that won't look right. We walked in and were able to say yes to every single question they had, as well as the most important thing, we were less money. So finding the right people that are not going to have, as we'll discuss later, the PITA fee or the higher than desired price point is an important factor of finding the right labor. Now, before we can truly understand how to develop and kind of filter out people that you want to work with, we have to understand these 3 things: the history, the standards, and then the lessons that have been learned. Now, porcelain slabs first came to the United States in the 2010s. They've been getting manufactured in Europe in the early part of the 2000s, but really the crux of the industry landed here in the US between 2012 and 2014. It was at the time mainly aimed at larger commercial projects, but you were seeing slabs that were stuck between 3.5 millimeters and 6.5. Now, as you can imagine, that's a really thin countertop if you were to apply it that way. But that's not what they were aiming for in the early days. Interestingly, though, there were no established guidelines, there was no established standards or processes at the time for the fabrication and installation of porcelain slabs. So it was kind of the quintessential Wild West at the time. But then you have to start to think about that problem. So if there aren't any established guidelines and there's no real rule book for them to follow, how are jobs going to be getting installed? Well, that's the issue that so many of the manufacturers had. They had to figure out a way to put this in the hands of installers, be able to educate designers and the decision makers so that these projects could take off and actually get successfully installed. And so that's where, on a recent episode of Porcelain Predications, my podcast, I interviewed one of the people that actually had their hand in developing those guidelines for our industry. So notice what he said about the introduction of the topic of how do we make this happen? A little bit about those early days with education for porcelain slabs, since that's really what our focus is on this podcast. What were some of the reasons that the training started here in the U.S.?
That's a great question because I was invited to attend the ISO conference that year was held in Clemson University, which was just 5 miles from our office, so I was there as a guest. And at the break, several of the manufacturers came to a group of us in the labor contingent and said, "We make a great product, can you help us learn how to install it?" And I thought, gee, that's an interesting comment because you make it, but we're not able to get it installed. And that's what really evolved into the standardization of panels and subsequently the 108, 19, and 20 for interior and exterior installation standards for the installation. It was critical to this success for not only having a standard for the products themselves, but having a standard for the installation, both interiorly and exteriorly. So if you caught that, the manufacturers at the time were manufacturing these slabs, but they had no idea how to teach how to get them installed. They had no idea what the guide rails needed to be for the industry at large. So if you notice here on this image, on this slide, we have 2 books that we're showcasing. The first on the left, it would be considered the Bible for many tile installers here in the United States. It's the TCNA, Tile Council of North America, and we call this the handbook. This goes through every type of installation method you could imagine for putting tile, both interior, exterior, dry zone, wet zone. If there is a fail on a job site,
probably the person that's going to own this first is the lawyer that's involved in the lawsuit. So this is a very important book that's been developed by both tile manufacturers, the mortar companies, trainers in the industry, as well as installers themselves, both small and large. They all participate on these committees to make these guidelines. So that's when, back in the day, as Scott was mentioning, they had to come out with this book to the right, which is specifically aimed at working with porcelain slabs. And that's where you get these two standards, A108 and A.19 and A108.20. Well, what do these books establish for us in the discussion that we're going through today? Well, first and foremost, if you order a slab that's at 8 millimeters, 12 millimeters, or anything larger, it does not actually qualify into the guidelines that this book holds. But many of the processes are still the same. This is really going to be specific to the slabs that are 3.5 to 6.5. There is discussions about how to approach the thicker materials and how to find some good guide rails there. At the same time, though, they do establish that the materials for which these rules go is for any piece of slab or tile that is 11 square feet or larger. So if you do just the rough mathematics of it, it's a 40 by 40 or a 56 by 28 piece of tile. So just think anywhere from that size all the way up to 126 by 63. That's a wide range of installation coverage that falls into the guidelines that this book sets out. But you notice that we call it GPTP/S. That's the official term for porcelain slabs. But what does it stand for? Gauged porcelain tile panel slabs. That's the official lingo, GPTPS. Obviously, though, it's much easier just to rattle off porcelain slabs. Now, since Scott was able to work with the committee to come up with these rules and these guidelines and basically proper installation methods, now you got to get that out into the field. So how has the industry been able to accomplish this? Well, you've had a couple different approaches over time. You've had smaller half-day and single-day events that are run by manufacturers, wherein the client, the installation firm, the fabricator comes to the warehouse and they see how to cut slabs from afar. Maybe they get to throw some thin set up on the wall themselves. The events that have truly had much more value to those attending have been ones that have been organized by the NTCA. These are normally a 1 or 2 day affair wherein you're able to install a floor, a wall panel, and you really run through the gamut of what are the correct ways of handling. They have changed over time. It used to be that each team would have their own little workspace. You get to score and snap lots of slabs. That's been modified a bit, but it's still incredibly valuable because this is teaching best case scenarios, how to handle things correctly. If someone has gained experience in the field and they have already multiple jobs under their belt, then they can approach CTEF, the organization that Scott is in charge of, and really learn through a paid test called the ACT. And they have one specifically aimed at porcelain slabs. CTEF offers education for a wide range of different applications for the tile industry, but this particular one for porcelain slabs is quite extensive. I shall put it that way. It's very difficult to pass. There are just a few people in the country that have this, and it is definitely something that if you have one in your backyard, utilize that person because they definitely will know their stuff. Now, just a few weeks ago, the tile industry had their big trade show, similar to KBIS, covering. It was held in Orlando. Now, knowing that I had this webinar to go through, I thought it would be interesting to pull in some of my old journalism background and interview a few key people about why education, training, and choosing the right materials is so important when an installer is out there in the field, or in your situation, when you're trying to select the right person to handle your project. Give a listen to see what they said.
But Porcelain Slab is still a new product. I mean, it's been in the market since 2010 here in US, and there are still a lot of installers that are not familiar with the product. You know, so you need to to have a training to use particular tools that are needed during installation, and to ensure that the product is cut properly and that is installed properly. You know, there is the right thin set, the right grout to be used. So that is extremely important.
From an education standpoint, education is critical to all installations. So leveraging the right products with the right installation techniques is really key. You could not get the proper coverage behind your slab. You could end up with cracking or chipping. So if you choose the right product designed for the right installation, there's a very strong likelihood you'll also get an excellent installation.
Even though the product has been around for 10 years, there is still very little knowledge. So when we start to produce slabs in Tennessee, that happened at the end of 2023, we quickly understood that our clients need help in training their own contractors, right? So, and that's why we put together like a 5,000 square feet space in our facility, and we equip it with all the needed tools and cutting lines to show how the material can be properly cut and installed.
So this is where it's important that when you have a tile installer or a stone shop that wants to work with this material, they really do need to get involved with the supplier, with the mortar manufacturers. Understand what it is they're actually working with. Get in a situation where it's okay to fail. Because in those situations, the manufacturers are going to provide material that can then in turn, quote unquote, be busted. And it's better that you bust and find that limit in your controlled environment before you're standing there with a very upset homeowner wondering what just happened to the slabs they ordered from Italy. So definitely that's why companies like Florum USA have invested in their factory in Tennessee with the training space they have there. Other ones like Stone Peak have had programs at their factories. And then you have companies like Sapien Stone, Neolith, Cosentino Decton, where they will send their representatives to your facilities, if it's a stone shop at least, to walk them through the correct parameters of working with their material. And this is an invaluable asset. And I definitely encourage anyone that has not attended one of those trainings to definitely do so. It's why we're getting called all the time to come out and try to do some trainings both with tile installers and stone shops. But now we can really pivot to think about the mentality change that has to occur for someone to work with porcelain slabs effectively. You know, with this Venn diagram that we're showing, we are going to be pulling from 3 different genres of work, 3 different trades. With the tile industry, it's the science behind what we're doing. It's knowing how to mix thin set properly, troweling it in a very specific way, understanding the prep work that is involved, especially in a wet zone. I get worried when I see some posts online where there's been no waterproofing behind porcelain slabs, and they say, oh, well, it's because the slab is so big or the silicone will seal off the water. Those one-day remodel companies, those are, I think, just that whole concept is wrong. You need to do it right from the get-go, from the studs out, we say. Prep it correctly. But then from the stone industry, that's where you're going to find the handling abilities of the installers, having the right equipment to be able to manufacture if it's a thicker slab, but just being able to already have a pre-built 2-man team, 3-man team to be able to carry these panels into place, rotate them, and get them stuck where they need to be stuck. And then from the glass industry, really what we find there is a lot of the suction cups, lifting equipment if you're on larger job sites, the fragility of the porcelain slabs. That's where that all comes together, all 3 genres, and right smack dab in the middle, you find your porcelain slab installer. Now, what would be something you would see if you found an installer that, for lack of better words, is ill-qualified to be working with the material? Well, let's take a couple images and see what we can glean from them. You know, there's a concept that anybody can tile, but not everybody tiles right. Well, this gentleman, I think, takes it a different approach, that anybody can slab, but not everybody slabs right. He basically was posting online out in California that he could just put some 2x4s in the back of his Cybertruck and have no problem. But if you notice, he's got just a single strap across the top. There's a couple going laterally along the length of the slabs, but in some of the other posts that he had, they had no safety equipment, no special lifting gear for these slabs, and wouldn't you know it, rattling down the road, some of this material did not get installed correctly. It broke, and it cost him dearly on one of his projects. It was disappointing at best. And what's interesting about these slides that we're going to be going through here, these are people with hundreds of thousands of social media followers. And I love following them because I get great content to show how not to do things. But in this particular situation for this gentleman, you know, he was working there at his home and pieces broke and he had to figure out why. Now, for this particular situation, understanding how to trowel, understanding the concepts, the fundamentals of tile work, especially with large format and porcelain slabs, is critical. If you look at it's like he's making some gnocchis up there on the wall, some pasta shells, but in reality, he has taken the thought, which is, I want to have as much coverage as possible, which is important to porcelain, but he has now negatively harmed them by creating artificial gaps and high spots with his thin set. So by doing this, instead of having the 95% bond that we would want to go for, he's probably only going to get about 10 to 20%. And as you can tell, he's already up 6 feet, maybe this is 12 feet. I would not want to be the homeowner down below if and when that thin set fails. And we can't even tell if it's the right type of thin set, as I think just based off of this image, he may have bought a very low-end mastic-like type adhesive. So again, choosing the right install partner that understands these basics. But that's nothing compared to the next gentleman. This particular fellow, as you can tell, standing on the very, very, very top rung of his ladder, is very safety conscious. And by being so safety conscious, he wants to make sure that his slabs are nailed onto the painted surface by using liquid nail. So first and foremost, again, as a social media influencer, many installers that are experienced have told this guy not to do it this way, but he has continued to show some bad habits. What can go wrong here? Well, first and foremost, especially at that height, we do not want to have anything fail. We want to ensure that there is proper contact with the slabs. He is basically at this particular install relying on the sheetrock to hold. And if you've ever been around somebody ripping out sheetrock, it's just paper. So again, you're allowing a 150-pound slab of porcelain to extend out on a high wall and hoping that that paper never fails, or that the paint itself does not create a bond breaker. So this is something that many stone shops are having to come to the realization that they can't go and install in a shower using just silicone. You have to use thin set. You have to have proper wall flattening and proper waterproofing before you get into the realm of, is this ready to be installed? So now that we understand the concepts of where the industry has come and the type of installers that we don't want to work with, we then have to understand the application to kind of build our mathematical formula for a successful job. And that's where we come into the idea of having an application appropriate selection. So what do we mean by that? Well, thickness dictates the process. If you go to your suppliers, if they're on the stone shop or at the tile yard, there are going to be a wide range of thicknesses. Everything now from 2 millimeters, very, very thin. You sneeze and it could potentially break. But 2 millimeters all the way up to 2 centimeter and in some cases 3 centimeter thick slabs. Obviously, a tile installer is not going to have the ability to cut a 1,200-pound slab of 3 cm porcelain. At the same time, some of our stone shops, with the equipment that they have and the skill set that they have, are not going to be able to handle something as thin and fragile as a 3.5 millimeter slab. It's just a completely different way to think about it. So thinner materials definitely, though, can be installed and fabricated, or let me rephrase it, that they can be fabricated in the field. Your middle range, the 12 millimeter, can be processed, but oftentimes it's better to have a stone shop do the cutting. as it is messy. You have to use water, and often will leave haze on the driveway or in the street. So from a safety standpoint and from complaints, obviously try to mitigate that by selecting the right person or company to do the processing for you. Now, if you are going to screen grab anything from this presentation today, this is going to be a good one for you. It is kind of a rough guideline on where I would recommend certain thicknesses be used. Obviously, you can go away from this, but this is just a good way to think of it. The 2 millimeter to 3.5 millimeter, those are going to be really good for walls and furniture pieces. Think cladding on cabinetry. Because of that thinner material, they're really not great at impact load, but it would be advisable, in my opinion, that a tile installer is going to be able to handle that better than a stone shop. If you go then to the middle range, that 5.5 to 8 millimeters, those are going to be able to be used on walls, floors, and in some circumstances, limited countertops. It's about how they get built, though, that is important. Tile installers definitely are going to be able to handle a wall and floor installation better just because of the concepts that are involved. But stone shops are more than capable of cutting the material, and especially on a wall installation, being able to get it prepped and done quickly. 12 millimeters, though, I do recommend that stone shops generally work with this, especially when it comes to a countertop and needing to have it mitered. Walls and floors, if you have to use the pattern, if there's no way to find it in a thinner material, fine. Definitely you can use it as walls and flooring, but it's not practical, I guess is the way I will phrase that. Because of the added weight, you are going to need extra labor to be able to pivot those panels for use on floors. The cutting is obviously slower, and let's not forget that the thicker the material, the more expensive it's going to be. So if you want to save funds for your client, definitely go to that thinner material of 6 mil and 8 mil for the walls and floors. And then, of course, as we discussed just a moment ago, if it's 2 centimeters or up, definitely you're going to want to send that to your stone shop to be made for countertops. I think that's really the one situation that you want to just leave it in that size range. 2 centimeter on a wall is really just throwing money to the wind, and you're gonna hurt somebody's back carrying that in. Now, it's okay. It's okay to qualify people, to understand if who you're working with is the right people to work with. So let's go through for the next few minutes and discuss ways to think about your trade partners and to understand how they can be successful in what they are doing. So to start with that point, understanding what they need to be successful. Well, first out of the gate, they need to attend certification and trainings. Much like what we talked about earlier with the NTCA and some of the manufacturers that offer training events. If your partner has never been to one, you're setting him up for a very expensive failure. Make sure that they have at least gone to one, and if possible, 2 different trainings. I think in the early days, I went to as many of, 9 or 10 in those first 4 or 5 years, because there was always something new that I was grabbing when I was there that I did not know, did not understand from my previous attendances. Understand, too, that there are specialized tools and machines for working with porcelain slabs. In fact, you can get one machine on the market that is being specifically aimed at stone shops for these ultra compact and porcelain materials. It costs $330,000 on the low end to get one of these, but it's specifically designed to do the job. At the same time, for some of the tile crews, you have to have specific lifting equipment, cutting gear, vibration tools. In total, you're looking at a starter kit of around 10 grand. Our vans at any given day or time might have upwards of $30,000 of gear specifically aimed at porcelain slabs in them. So it is an expensive venture to commit to working with porcelain. And that would be something you have to understand, is that they've put in the money for this gear that's required, that makes them not break anything. So why not kind of respect that idea when they hand you the bill and it's a little higher than you expected. But at the same time, highly encourage you that if they say they've done work with porcelain in the past, ask to see what photos they have. Definitely up close shots of their miters. That's an area that seems like it comes up a lot. See the joints, see if there's anything even in their showroom. I think if they're showing it off in their showroom, that shows that they want to work with the material. So it's perfectly fine to ask, do you have any images? What can you show me? Is there anything I can go see in town since this is the first time we've worked together? And oddly enough, something that I don't feel like gets asked enough when you are working with a contractor in the stone industry or tile industry, are you okay? And yeah, mentally, sure, we want to address if everybody's mentally fine, but more importantly, are you okay with the design, with the concept, with the scope of work that we're looking at? One contractor might be fine doing the porcelain slabs on the floor, but he has no experience building a countertop. And then vis-a-vis, the countertop guy might not be comfortable doing the flooring. We were actually hired in not too long ago last year to do a 4,000 square foot floor in a bank. And when we came back a little while later just to do some small touch-ups, lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, there were porcelain countertops. And I will tell you, those porcelain countertops were done really well. I give my compliments to that fabricator, but that is where you might find some folks that want to only focus on walls. Maybe they only want to focus on countertops. It's perfectly fine. But the key thing here is communicate with your partners. Are you willing to do this side of the project? Now, let's kind of delve into that questionnaire, though, a little bit more. Trust is earned, vet everything. And we're going to focus on stone shops. These are going to be some questions that as you are interviewing your fabricator to really understand, do they know their stuff or are they bluffing? Are they going to learn on the fly? These are questions that I feel like if I was managing and someone came in and asked me, I would very much want you as my client because it would show the value you have in education. So here we go. What brands have you trained with and what thicknesses do you prefer working on? So think about why this question is important. First and foremost, it allows you to know what brands can this particular company feel comfortable working with. And more importantly, are they going to be trouble if you have to use a thinner slab on a job site? Or are they able to deliver everything that you might need on your project? This question, it really also opens up to the trust factor between you and them. That they're going to be willing to say, hey, we've worked with this company, but we've never tried that one, so maybe we're going to have to order extra material or wait for training. It's just a good question to ask. What brands do you want to work with? Rather than forcing something on someone where they're going to be resistant to the idea. And something that comes up in the TCNA handbook a lot with porcelain slabs is the flatness factor. You need to have that wall 1/8 of an inch over 10 feet for flatness. So from a fabricator, most guys have never been asked that question. How are you going to flatten this wall? If they know how to prep and flatten, you have found a partner in your market that you need to lock down because you can't expect the builder to do the prep work. He doesn't understand the tolerances, and their low-cost tile guy, well, he definitely is not going to care that at the 8-foot mark, the wall all of a sudden skews out another inch out of the way. In 11 years of installing, we've only gone on to 2 job sites where everything was flat and ready to go. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we had a project where the main wall in the bathroom was 1 inch out of plumb from the bottom to the top of 10 feet. But yet the side walls were perfectly plumb. So being able to prep and adjust for that is going to lead to a more successful installation and make it so that the measurements that they take after the prep work will actually work. So what thin set will your team use to bond slabs to the walls, and how will you control spacing between said panels? Well, why do we care about the thin set? It's still going to be behind the slab. Why is that important? Well, the thin set manufacturers actually came out with thin sets specifically designed for porcelain slabs. The standard tile that someone is installing, they're going to go in there and they're going to pull the cheapest bag they can off the shelf at Home Depot or Lowe's or their local tile supplier. They don't care. It's $10. But if they choose the wrong thin set, it could delaminate. It could not hold up long enough. Or their true secret here is that the thin set, as you're troweling 50 some square feet at once on the wall, and then you turn around and you trowel another 50 feet on that panel, you're anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes in. And if you've chosen a cheap thin set, it's going to dry over and it's not going to allow you to bond and go through the whole process of sticking that slab. So you have to go with high grade, high quality thin sets, top tier from all the different brands, but they have been designed for porcelain slabs. And then the concept of control spacing between panels, even though they have gone and flattened out a wall, you do not want to have your panels come too close because they could potentially clank and chip. And if there is any movement in the substrate, because houses and structures, they do move, if it's too close, again, you could cause an artificial crack. So there are rules about the spacing. The TCNA guidelines establish that it's a minimum 1/8 of an inch grout joint between panels. I know for some designers that's probably too big for you, but it's for everyone's betterment because of the inaccuracies that can often come from scoring and snapping in the field. Now, this one is specific to countertop production. What substrate will you use for buildup of countertops, and where will the seams be located? Now, just flat out, I'm just going to tell you, if your fabricator is using wood, change fabricators. That's just, I'm telling you that straight. Wood will warp, it has moisture in it, it will torque, and it will fail your porcelain. If you've ever heard of somebody having a porcelain that has broken as a countertop, I would probably venture to say 60 to 70% of that is substrate related and how they're putting the substrate to the back of the porcelain. We call it the sandwich. And for quick analogies here, it's the difference between a BLT sandwich and a grilled cheese sandwich. A grilled cheese, you can't tear it apart. But with a BLT, you definitely can pull the different components out. We want the grilled cheese when it comes to porcelain countertops. So this question, again, is made to understand what is the understanding of my fabricator? Do they really know what they're doing? And are they putting it together properly? If you are mitering an edge and your fabricator says they're going to do an L shape, you've just voided your warranty with the manufacturer. Really, with porcelain countertops, it's about the rectangles. Putting rectangles together so that there is no chance for built-up tension and potential cracking out of a corner. So enough beating up on the stone shops. Let's talk about tile companies now. For a tile guy, he's normally been working in a cargo van of some type. So how is he going to get the slabs to a job site? Does he have the right production equipment? Does he have the right installation equipment? Does he have the rated porcelain fabrication table that costs $3,000? Does he have the right scoring and snapping gear? Does he have lifting equipment? If he's doing a floor, does he have a rack that will support the material? These type of questions of understanding what has he invested in to do the job right. I've seen and heard of guys that don't know what they're doing using pallets, using tables made out of wood, and there is inherently bows that cause those slabs to crack as they're cutting. It's unbelievable the difference when a slab is supported and when it's not, just how tricky it is to manufacture that in the field. What labor and equipment do you need to install these slabs? Now, for a standard tile crew, it maybe is just an owner-operator. Maybe it's a two-man team, a lead and an apprentice. But if you're going with a 12 millimeter slab that weighs 300 to 400 pounds, is he going to need extra team to get it up the face of that fireplace? Is he going to need extra people to get it up to the second floor for that shower? Or if they're doing a floor, are they going to need to rent one of the vacuum lifters that are available from the glass industry? Again, get your guy to think a little bit as he's looking at your project to understand if he's the right fit. And here is something that has been coming more aware in the tile industry as of late. For complicated cuts, how will you ensure accurate measurements? In other words, how are you going to take that weird wall shape where we have a couple cutouts and it's a dog leg here and there? How are you going to get it from the wall onto your slab? And that is where the concept of templating is starting to be educated a little bit more for tile guys on social media. That's the idea of either taking hard sticks, plastic or wood, and creating a cutout, or perhaps they want to bring in a stone shop and digitally measure those walls. Either way, those are things that I love to teach. That's what my first position was 16 plus years ago, was as the measure guy. So it's definitely a good habit to have and a good technique to utilize. So obviously we've beat up the tile guy, we've beat up the stone shop. We're not done yet. We still have a little bit more to go through. And this comes down to the process. How are you going to handle inside corners and cutouts? If this is on a fireplace where there's going to be thermal expansion, do you want to leave that with a sharp 90-degree corner where it's going to split out later on? Or are you going to leave a radius, a minimum radius, so that the tension can be contained? Or is the safer, more mitigated way just to add a lateral joint across the corner? Same with windows. These are the things to be asking so that you can understand how is he going to make it, not so that he gets the job installed, but that it lasts longer than just that week or that month. What is the smallest seam between panels you install, and what will you fill the joints with? This is an interesting concept. For walls, I've actually found that silicone and all the joints have been a smarter idea, because the alternative is usually grout. And if you're really not thinking, it's epoxy. Epoxy, you cannot sand that down without affecting the face of a porcelain slab. So being able to control the materials. With the floor, obviously grout is fine, but every 20 feet, you need to have a soft joint per ANSI standards. So just things to think about as we're, again, interviewing these contractors to work with. And for your notes, as you're going through and you're having these projects bid out and budgeted, this question has come up so many times on the interviews with some of the other installers around the country. And it's interesting the variance that we have found talking to these guys. For folks that are in high intensity custom work, they might have to order one extra slab for every 4 that they're having to cut. For commercial projects where it's about volume, that might be able to get down to 1 extra slab for every 10. But being able to understand the insurance policy that you're really buying into, that you're having material come from 3 months out from Italy or Spain or India or China or wherever you're buying these slabs from, do you really want to have no room for error and then get stuck without the project being completed? The project I mentioned earlier that was 4,000 square feet, it had a lot of cutouts. So we went through the blueprints and we identified we were going to have a panel break on this corner, we're going to have a panel break on that corner. And sure enough, what we guesstimated was exactly what reality became. And we were able to end the project with just a handful of slabs left. And thankfully, we're able to get the job done. It would have been terrible for us to not have thought that way and then in turn be stuck at the end piecing things together. It would have been terrible. But now I come to you. I ask, please be a good design partner. Work with the trades. Understand that they're not there to fight you, they're there to work with you. So what can we do to make that cohesion between the contractor and you, the designer, work? Understand that slab size may dictate the layout. If you're trying to get a slab that's 48 inches, but your wall is 60 inches, we're going to have to put a joint in it. And work with your tile installer to figure out what's going to be the most appealing way to install it. Now, by guidelines and as a CTI installer of tile, I would say balance out the cut halfway, and that way you do not have a cut smaller than half a slab. But sometimes the patterns will hide it out and make it look better. That's what's unique about porcelain slabs, is that you can really do a lot of unique things with them. And it also allows you to get by where normally you'd have some eyesores. But again, working with your contractor to understand the right slab size to use on the project is going to be key. Understand too that mitigating a problem is for everyone's benefit. And that's where room for expansion is key. The TCNA handbook calls for an 1/8 of an inch expansion joint along the perimeter on changes of plane. That, though, when you're trying to tip in a huge panel from the ground up, sometimes you need a little bit more, especially if that ceiling is not quite as even. So we normally are going to ask for just a little bit of extra room at the top that can get filled with paintable caulking, or have a sheetrock team come in behind to mud out and smooth out that area to hide any irregularities on the cut. But the key thing here is understanding that these slabs are going to need to have that movement because of how large they are. So mitigate the potential problem by having room for expansion. Also, just look out for what we call Goldilocks. What is a Goldilocks with porcelain slabs? Well, that's somebody that has experience, that is either charging quite a lot because they know that they're good, or they're charging not very much because they figured out the efficiencies. It's why, again, that term Goldilocks, because sometimes it's just so rare to find. You can have stone shops that do charge way more than they should. And that's probably because they don't want to do your project. And that's where you've got to really weed out who's going to be able to help you out the best. Sometimes the expensive one is the right one because they see things that others don't. On a project recently, we were $40,000 more expensive than the other crew. Why? Most likely, we were spotting things on that project that needed to be addressed well before the other crew had even set foot inside the building. They just went off of blueprints and did not address so many of the concerns to mitigate the problems ahead of time. But it's okay to have that secondary quote to kind of feel out where is this project really going to be at. But if there is a huge disparity in pricing, really you need to start figuring out who's including what and identify with some of those questions that we asked before, how are they going to address the project? Something else, get the installer into your job early. Get them there to identify, is this practical? Can we actually make this happen? On one particular job years ago, we were there before the sheetrock was up so that we could slide the panels through the studs to get them into that master suite, to get them installed in one large panel rather than broken up into smaller chunks. Will it be acceptable in the current location if it's a shower? These are those kind of concepts. Just get them in early. If you're going to be ordering something from overseas, you've got the time. Might as well have him there early to identify what's possible and what's not. Now, you have built a fantastic reputation for your business. That's why clients come to you. Well, the same can be said for your porcelain slab installer. They've also built a reputation of working with these very dangerous and complicated materials that nobody else wants to work with. So build some trust with them. Understand that their reputation is something that they value just like you do. But they are never going to shortchange you. And they themselves are going to be just as devastated when that porcelain slab breaks as they're trying to handle it. It's devastating. And it's one of those things that I've had nightmares in the past where I wake up going, no, it broke. It's just because we care when we're dealing with these slabs. It's not easy, but we want to be true artisans with what we do. And once you find that valued porcelain slab installer, that partner, enjoy the process that you have designing projects with them in tow. It allows you to take a project that's like this and visually make it like this. So definitely find that tradesperson in your area. If you need help, by all means, feel free to reach out. I know a lot of good installers around the country, small markets, big markets. Would be more than happy to help you out if you need a recommendation from what I can tell, obviously, being talking to them on social media. So in review, 3 key things. Education matters. Make sure that whoever you're working with is getting educated, knows what they're talking about, and understands the rules for successful installations. Consider the application that you're working with. If you don't consider the application of the type of material that would be best suited, the person that would be able to handle it, you may not have a good, smooth installation process. So make sure that you're considering these things as you're designing out the process. Even things as simple as should we go matte or should we go polish could also have a bearing on the type of material and where you want to use it. And lastly, verify and build a partnership, not a transaction, a partnership. If you are able to build the partnership, that installer, that fabricator, they will have your back and they will treat you right. It's just the same with your client. You're trying to build a relationship where they trust your word. Well, at the same time, these fabricators and installers, they're going to want to work with you over and over and over again if you're able to bring these awesome projects to them and trust their ability to deliver for you. It's something that I've valued time and again with some of the folks that we've had on our projects, is just that trust factor. But knowing that when we're all said and done, that we're going to be able to help them out on another project soon thereafter. So, in conclusion, thank you. I know I can ramble a little bit, but I'm so happy to see that you guys have invested some time today to learn a little bit more about porcelain slabs. It's been my passion for going on now 11 and a half years. But should you need to reach out to me, by all means, here's my email, my website, social media. I'm very active as Porcelain Panel Pro. But hopefully I have been able to help you out with some of the questions of understanding what to look for in good partners. And more importantly, as we said earlier, if you can't find somebody, it's because they're probably hidden around the corner. So feel free to reach out. I know a bunch of guys, and if I don't know somebody in your area, I know a few others to reach out to that very well may. And then keep in mind too, some of your manufacturers will have approved lists for people that work with their material. But thank you very much, and hopefully any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer at a later time.